Okay, thank you very much everybody for coming tonight. We're very fortunate to have some incredible hosts at our reception. I won't speak very long because I know nobody came here to hear me. But first, I'm going to turn the mic over to our co-chair, the Honorable James Blanchard. Here.
I have a 45-minute address that's been written by Joe Biden. No, excuse me, I got to put that away. David, thank you to you and Matthew Mendelson, the staff, the two deans of Case Western and Western in Canada. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for all your hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jim Blanchard. I have the privilege of being co-chair of the Canada-U.S. Law Institute. Now, can you all hear me?
Yes.
And I want to know this, are we serving wine at dinner?
Yes.
I hope so, anyway. Having served as ambassador to Canada, by the way, I know, anyway, I won't get into that. But let me just say that this reception is hosted by Ambassador Gary Dewar, who I've now known for 20 years. Who served with great distinction as Premier of Manitoba, and now as Canada's ambassador to the U.S. He will be introduced by Jim Peterson. The other co-host of this reception is David Jacobson, our ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Canada, whose planes, all of his planes have been canceled, kind of like mine. And so he's not going to be here, but he's going to be represented by an outstanding career foreign servant, the Consul General of the United States to I guess it's not just Toronto, but the world, whatever it is, Jim Dickmeyer. But I do want to also acknowledge a few other people. I want to thank Roy Norton and the Consulate General in Detroit for their long-standing support of the Canada-U.S. Law Institute. You've covered yourself with glory these years, and we've always been very blessed. The Consulate General's office is in Detroit, by the way. Michigan, the most beautiful state in the world. Eat your heart out, Ohio. Now, my co-chair, Jim Peterson, you're going to hear from him in a moment, had a fabulous career as a lawyer, a scholar, a teacher, member of Parliament for many, many years, then Trade Minister in Canada. And he's the brother of the former Premier who I met 30 years ago now. And he's just an all-around fabulous guy. But I thank you for your leadership, and thank you for covering me when I slept through the alarm this morning. Anyway, the other thing is Admiral Parks, thank you again. You've been with us all these years. Your leadership is deeply appreciated. We couldn't have a successful conference. Frankly, we couldn't have a successful managed border without you, because the border is really, in most places in our area, water. Thank you very much for your leadership. I have a couple of things I want to say. One is that the Canada-U.S. Law Institute is housed here at Western in London, Ontario. It involves law students, scholars, professors, lawyers, public officials, business leaders, labor leaders. We get together every year here in Cleveland. And we have, one year we have a discussion on trade issues, which is very common. Another year it was energy issues. Another year it was managing the border. I want the members of our executive committee and our advisory committee to raise their hands, please. Larry? All right. These people make it work. They make it work. And this Canada-U.S. Law Institute will go on and on and on. However, the launch of our Great Lakes Regional Council works. We hope that's going to work. But but we are an ongoing organization of lawyers. It's the only lawyer legal organization between the two countries, so you need to know that. But we are blessed with all of you. Many of you came from other walks of life. You haven't been involved with us. You've been leaders in business and labor and industry and NGOs, in promoting the water quality of the Great Lakes, in promoting industry, in promoting infrastructure, in promoting a bright future for the Great Lakes. And we are delighted you're here. These panels, I didn't hear all of them, have been fabulous. So you all deserve a vote of thanks and applause. Thank you. You know, I have worked on Great Lakes issues for about 38 years. I grew up in the sand dunes of Bridgman, Michigan. We have a home in suburban Detroit, but more importantly, we have a home on Lake Michigan in Pentwater, Michigan. And I've been worrying about Great Lakes water quality, Great Lakes water quantity, non-indigenous species, you name it, dunes protection, energy issues, a lot of different things. And people here have worked on these for maybe not as long, but almost as long, really, and have done a wonderful job. Two things recently that had happened that, I've worked on that are really exciting. One is, we're going to get a new bridge between Detroit and Windsor. You've heard that, but it is going to happen. Ambassador Dewar has worked hard on that one, as has Roy Norton and our Ambassador Jacobson and a lot of you here, particularly the business and labor people. I mean, on the U.S. side alone, it's 10,000 building trades jobs, more than that on the Canadian side, and it secures our trade future, which involves millions of jobs. The other thing I want to mention that hasn't been touched on, but maybe lightly, is that when Chrysler and General Motors ran into trouble, and they were rescued, and they're now doing, by the way, famously and fabulously. I've been on the board of Chrysler, and I can tell you, a great future. When the United States and President Obama, thank you, President Obama, announced the rescue, what most people don't know is that Canada and Ontario were part of that. It's just another example, not just the bridge, not just the IJC, which of course has been working since 1909, but recently, the auto rescue, jobs, the economy, quality of life, education. Those are two recent examples of areas where we have worked on to secure our future. I am very bullish about the future of the Great Lakes, having grown up here. I think it's bright. We're not just the center of advanced manufacturing. We're not just the center of Canada-U.S. trade. We're not just the center of 95% of the surface fresh water of the United States and 20% of the world. We're not just the center of energy or great universities. I mean, we're the center of know-how. That was discussed earlier. We have a fabulous future. And that's why Cooley decided to focus on the fact that the cradle of cooperation between the United States and Canada is the Great Lakes region. Of course, I could say it's really Detroit and Windsor, but that would be parochial. By the way, in Windsor, they root for the Red Wings. I like that. But anyway, do they still play hockey in Toronto, by the way? I don't know. But I hear they're going to be in the playoffs this year, right? Anyway, so much for my editorializing. All I can tell you is this. The future belongs to states and places and communities where there's a high quality of life. You can talk all you want about regulation, taxes, and this and that and the other. A high quality of life is the future of our civilization, as they say in Canada. In Michigan, we say civilization. But anyway, that's the truth. And I will tell you this. Our two deans here, who you've heard from and will hear from, and our two ambassadors and our consul general have done as much as anyone to worry about that quality of life, whether it's education or jobs or the environment. And we're so thrilled you're here. And Ambassador Dewar, Ambassador Jacobson suggested that in addition to having a conference on Great Lakes issues, because they drive the bi-national process here, that maybe we should launch a Great Lakes organization that would have some continuance. to deal with issues because they felt while there are a lot of really good Great Lakes organizations, and there have been really, as far as I know, at least since 1909, whether it's on industry or fisheries or the environment or the wonderful work of the IJC or different groups, the Great Lakes Commission, that in addition to that, we ought to have an umbrella organization that could talk with our federal governments in a holistic, comprehensive way about how to advance the future, and build it for the Great Lakes region, so that the future will not just be nice for us, but will belong to us. So I thank you, Ambassador Dewar and Ambassador Jacobson, and yes, and Admiral Parks, for being strong supporters of this and promoters of it. It will work only if we all work together and we make sure we don't try to duplicate or get into turf wars or do anything that would undermine the existing good work that's going on. Because it's going on whether we're here or not, and it's important, and it's going on for years. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to a glass of wine to toast all of you for your wonderful participation. And now I'm turning this over to my co-chair, who covered for me this morning, the distinguished gentleman, that's what we say in Washington.
I'm not a gentleman.
And usually you mean it, I do in this case, Jim Peterson. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Well, friends, we have just heard his warm-up speech before he announces his candidacy for the governor of Michigan. And I'll tell you this, I'm going to be there to work for him. He is an outstanding person. I first met Jimmy through my brother. They became very close friends as Premier of Ontario and Governor of Michigan. And they were very good to us, Heather, my wife and I, when we were in Ottawa. You know, we faced some very difficult times in those days in terms of the separatism in Quebec, and the referendum was coming up in 1995. Now, it's a rule of international law that no one state interferes in the internal matters of another state. Well, Jim broke that rule. On the eve of the referendum, when we were behind in the polls, he brought to Canada President Clinton, who spoke in the House of Commons, and we won that referendum by 51,000 votes. Jimmy, all Canadians owe you a great debt of gratitude. I have been very privileged to be able to work with him since then on many things, and it's what a great pleasure to co-chair this great institution, Cooley, with you, Jim. I get the great pleasure of introducing a great ambassador. Ambassador Dewar had a very distinguished civic life in Ottawa, or in Winnipeg, before he entered the political arena, which he did in 1966. He was elected shortly thereafter. The New Democratic Party, a social democratic party, was defeated, and the premier left, and this newcomer, hardly in politics at all, was called upon by his fellow colleagues in caucus to take over the leadership of this party that had been defeated. He won a hotly contested leadership, and he went on to become the premier. In getting there, this remarkable individual, here was his platform as a social democrat. We're going to reduce taxes, we're going to pay down the debt, we are going to make sure that we deal with the deficit, and at the same time, we're going to increase spending on health care and education, which he did repeatedly. In every one of his budgets from 1999 to 2009, every one of them, that was what he was able to do. And he was able to do that even when in 2008, when the world was in depression and we were really struggling. And this is a testimony to the intelligence and the determination and the ability of this person to lead. Let me just give you a few examples of, and I'm enjoying this, a few examples of what he did as a progressive leader. 2 years before the federal government dealt with same-sex abortion and passed it, he had provided for full adoption rights for gays and lesbians. He provided for civilian oversight of the Manitoba Police Force. He fought for the Kyoto Accord. He did not ban replacement workers when a strike was on, even though he was beholden to unions. He fought for Paul Martin's Kelowna Accord, where we were going to make a much better deal with the First Peoples of our nation. He built a biomedical corridor from Minnesota to Manitoba for research, investment, and for technology. He was a very strong defender of the NAFTA. He led delegations around the world promoting Manitoba and Canada. And, as I said, he cut taxes in every one of his budgets. A poll during the height of the recession, March 2008, gave Ambassador Duerr an 81% approval rating. I know of no other politician, except perhaps Jim Blanchard, who ever got that high. And I never got that high, even when it was only my family who was voting for me. From my point of view, the greatest possible compliment that was ever paid to Ambassador Duerr was by a fellow member, NDPer of the Manitoba legislature, and he said, and I quote, "He is a small L liberal without a socialist bone in his body." At the top of his game in 2009, he announced he would not run again. In a stroke of genius, the Prime Minister appointed him to a very difficult post, Ambassador to the United States of America. We are thrilled to have you here tonight, and we are thrilled to know you. We are very indebted to you for all you have done for Canada, both as Premier and Legislator, but now as Ambassador.
Thank you very much. It's almost tempting to run again. The difference between being a Premier or a Governor and an Ambassador, you know what the difference is? When you're a Premier and you go to a meeting, maybe with the IJC, maybe with some other group, and you get a really good idea, you say, "That's great, we're going to do it." When you're an ambassador, you go to the same meeting and you get a really good idea, "That's great, I'm going to recommend it." So I want to just clarify the difference. I also want to say that Jim has anointed Governor Blanchard, Ambassador Blanchard, to be running again in the next election campaign. I happen to believe the governor's spot in Michigan is not open. I believe there is a Senate job open, so I interpret it in a slightly different way. But he and I and Roy Norton are working very, very well with the leadership team in Michigan. We are very careful about declaring the bridge is going to happen. There's a saying in Canada, you don't put your hands in the air until the puck's in the net. It would apply to the Detroit Red Wings, it would apply to the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Winnipeg Jets. But we're getting there, and we've got a great team. Governor Blanchard, Governor Schneider, Roy Norton, all of us, no political uniforms. Let's get workers working. Let's build that bridge. Let's get it done, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that together. So I'm very laudatory about the relationships we have. It's wonderful to be here again in this spectacular building. Cleveland, and I know Roy was, James was talking about Cleveland, Detroit, and I am a crust cutting off of wine drinking, pinstripe suit wearing diplomat. But I would say that I love coming to Cleveland. You've got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Neil Young's there. Toronto claims that we claim him. And of course, Rush is going to be introduced to the Hall of Fame. We got somebody that's with Rush, and so we're really happy about that. And you've also got Johnny's Downtown. How many people have been to Johnny's Downtown? Okay, so after the dinner tonight, and after the bar is closed here, I will be leading a delegation to Johnny's Downtown. So I really want, in the interest of bilateral relationships, I want to make sure all of you have the stamina to go to that great institution here in Cleveland. I think that here at this meeting, I think it's wonderful that we are again talking about the environmental challenges and opportunities here in the Great Lakes. And I also think we're going to take the next step to bind us together on what we can do to be a stronger economic force working together. I know that the White House and the Prime Minister's office in Canada pays attention to what people and leaders say around the Great Lakes from our two countries. Mayors, institutions that are representing education, businesses, governors, provincial legislatures, state and municipal government. They pay attention. And I think that we can take that great coordination on the environment and on the Great Lakes sustainability and be a strong voice in a vacuum sometimes for economic growth and activity. We have challenges, and I'm sure these panels today talked about those challenges. We have challenges in terms of the sustainability of 20% of the fresh water in the world. We know that water levels affect water quality. We know that water levels affect economic activity. We know that water quantities affect the quality of these beautiful, beautiful lakes and seaways that we share. And we are going to have to continue to work on ways to have strategies that do not divert water out of this waterways on both sides of the border, but rather retain it, steward it, and manage it in a collective way on both sides of our border. We've done a great job on reducing phosphorus from municipalities, a tremendous job. But we're going to have to do better on all other sources of phosphorus. Why? Because invasive species have come into this lake, into these lakes, and have only taken certain algae and not taken others, and that's allowed phosphorus to grow. So the leadership that was in play 10 or 15 years ago on municipal sources of phosphorus has got to come from this group here around the Great Lakes in a coordinated way. We're only as strong as the weakest link. We're only as strong as the leaders that are here today. We've got to be leaders again, and we are leaders on this, the greatest source of fresh water in the world, 20% of the world. I also think that and I think the Mayor Barrett is here, he's taken the Great Lakes Municipal Group from 92 to 97, when we were in D.C. a few weeks ago, when, by the way, all of D.C. was shut down, but there wasn't a delegate from the Great Lakes that didn't make it in 1 inch of snow to the embassy to have Canadian beer. The caterers couldn't make it, so we served Canadian and American beer together on a voluntary basis. We kept the place open. I think it was like a Crocodile Dundee show, you know, you call that a knife? This is a knife. You call that a blizzard? This is a blizzard. So we didn't have any problem with that, having a good party. But you look, when I go to the southern states, when I go to all the states that I visit as ambassador, it's not oil, because we think that oil and gas is going to be in abundance. It's concerning people. And I think that that's true. That was last year's battle. It continues to be a little bit in Washington. Going from 81 to 82 pipelines, not that complicated, apparently. By the way, it's easier to put Crown Royal in a pipeline down to Texas than it is to put oil in a pipeline down to Texas. But I digress, because I'm right across from Whiskey Island, Admiral, so I know where that is. But the biggest issue is going to be water. We talked about that in Phoenix just a few weeks ago. The biggest issue confronting all of the United States and Canada and all of North America is water. You can't sustain population growth without water. You can't sustain the quality of life without water. You are on the economic leadership of the greatest water source in all of the world. And I'm very, very confident that this conference and this meeting and this launch of the Council of the Great Lakes Region on top of the Canada-U.S. Law Institute work that you're doing is going to lead to bigger and better things. Finally, I know that Admiral Parks is retiring later this year, although we have phoned the President of the United States. We have so much influence with him. We have phoned the President of the United States to get an extension. The smoke has come out of the White House. It's white smoke for Admiral Parks. He does such a great job. We have a little bit of fun on who won the War of 1812. And of course, Canada did win the War of 1812. But beyond that, we're still dealing with the Rush-Bagot Agreement, and we're still working on getting a sustainable ballast water to keep endangered species out of the Great Lakes and working together. I'm very confident we can do it. This is the can-do group of the Great Lakes. Let's keep can-doing it into the future. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.